Danny, what's going on?
Yeah, I'm an atheist, so maybe we could talk about that. Why you
Sure,
prefer theism or Islam over atheism, or maybe start with that.
sure. Um, Anywhere in particular you want to start? Any question or?
Um, well, I guess, do you have an argument for theism or something? Like we could start there.
Very simply, why I believe in a necessary existence. I believe this universe is finite, limited, and dependent. All finite, limited, dependent quantities require an external, necessary explanation.
Why is that?
Because by definition, something that's unnecessary by definition is dependent.
So, well, but the point is that and I'm presuming that what you mean by dependent is that it's explained by another. Is that my is
It
other?
requires an explanation.
Oh, okay. But there are things that could be unexplained, right?
What do you mean by unexplained? I don't know. I'm not talking about things we don't know. I'm talking about something that requires something else to exist. So, for example, I'm unnecessary or I'm contingent. You know what that means?
Contingent just means, with respect to propositions or things that existed, there could be possible worlds where that thing doesn't exist or that truth value is different.
Yeah. So
right?
Anything that's contingent by definition is dependent upon something else for its existence. By definition, is not independent. By definition, requires an external explanation of some kind.
But could there be things that have no explanation?
When you say no explanation, you mean like they exist independently?
No. Well,
because when you say no explanation, okay, I'll give you an example. I can't explain how gravity works, but gravity exists. Like, if that's what you mean by no explanation.
No. Like, I guess the true dichotomy, as I see it, is between something that's dependent and not dependent. Presumably, it's not a true dichotomy. Yeah. But presumably, it's not a true dichotomy to say that something's dependent or independent.
So they think there's a third option?
Well, by independent, presumably you think that it explains itself or something like that. Presumably you think that God is not like unexplained; it just explains itself. I'm sort of assuming that
it's not okay. I don't.
Is God explained?
What do you mean by explained? Does he need an explanation for his existence? Like, does he need something external to himself? I'm sorry.
You can think of it that way, yeah.
Okay, so God by we don't have to use the word God. Let's not use the word God. Let's just say a necessary existence. A necessary existence, by definition, does not require any external explanation. Otherwise, it would not be necessary.
Okay, so it doesn't have an explanation.
If what I just said is what you understand by that, then yeah.
Okay, could there be contingent things that don't have an explanation?
Something by definition contingent has to have an explanation.
No, not always. It depends on how you're using the term, right? Something that.
So do you believe something that's sorry? Do you believe something that's contingent? So just to be clear, something that's contingent by definition is dependent, correct?
No. It depends. I mean, they're different. You're running a kind of contingency argument here, right? And there are different senses of contingent. In logic, a contingent proposition is just a proposition that has a different truth value in another world. But that doesn't mean that therefore there's something that explains why there's one truth value over another.
So, for example, this water bottle is it contingent?
Yes, I would say so.
Good, I agree. Is it dependent?
In this case, in this world, it's dependent. Well, but you could have a world where, in other words, I think there could be worlds where there's a water bottle, but it has no explanation. It just has no explanation.
Okay, but by definition, anything finite requires an explanation.
You see, I don't know why that would be. I mean, I don't know why that would be true.
So you think something can exist, something finite, limited, and dependent can also exist independently?
Well, the word dependent there is already understood in terms of explanation, right? So I'm just saying that there could be a world where all there is a water bottle. It's always existed, okay? But it has no explanation for it.
What are the attributes of a water bottle?
Well, I can name the features of that water bottle. It's plastic, has water in it, has a label on it.
Does plastic by definition exist on its own, or does plastic by definition, by the essence of what plastic is, does it require something external to itself to bring it about into the way it is?
Well, it depends on the world that you're in. All I'm saying is that.
Well, right now, how about this? Instead of dealing with other worlds, let's deal with the world we're living in right now.
No. But the word contingent is a modal notion. It's a modal notion. When you describe something as necessary contingent, you're talking about modality. You're talking about other possible worlds.
Okay, so if you don't want to use the word contingent, okay, fine. Dependent.
Okay, so you by dependent you just mean explained by. It
requires an explanation. Requires an explanation.
Right, and all I'm saying is that there could be things that didn't have to exist. In principle, there could be things that didn't have to exist that have no explanation.
If they didn't have to exist, then how do you explain their existence?
They don't have, look, I'm just saying it's possible. There's no logical problem in saying that something exists, it has no explanation, but it didn't have to exist.
That doesn't make any sense, though, because for something, if something doesn't have to exist,
what's the logical problem?
I'll tell you. Okay. Because to say something doesn't have to exist would, by definition, require something bring it into existence.
That's what's in question. That's exactly what's in question. I'm saying there's no contradiction.
So if something doesn't have to exist, why would it exist?
Again, there could be something that didn't have to exist that has no explanation.
I hear you.
What's the problem? Is there a contradiction?
I hear you repeating your belief. Okay, great. But how can, if something doesn't have to exist, how by definition would it come into existence?
Again, there's an open question. There's an open question about that. Do you know?
So you don't know. So basically, you don't know. You don't know.
No. Look, I'm just saying that if there's a water bottle that exists, there's an open question of whether it has an explanation or whether it doesn't have an explanation.
Okay, and so you're saying that bottle doesn't have to exist, correct?
The water doesn't. Yes, the water bottle doesn't have to exist.
Good. So if something doesn't have to exist, by definition, how would it come into existence?
Again, there's an open question about that. Do you know what I mean when I say there's an open question about it?
Basically, you're saying you don't know.
No. Look, in philosophy, there's something called a brute contingent. In philosophy, there's something called a brute contingent fact, okay, or a brute contingent thing. Okay. Now,
by the way, I'm not the most knowledgeable in philosophy, so forgive me if I don't know these terms.
Unfortunately, this is all philosophy. When you're talking about modality,
fine. No. Okay. I'm not saying don't challenge me. I'm just saying if I don't understand the words instantly, just bear with me.
Okay. So brute is just a term that we might use that no explanation. So if something brutally exists, it has no explanation. Okay. Contingent, all it means is that it didn't have to exist.
Something brute has no explanation.
Yeah, so a brute fact has no explanation, or brute thing.
By the way, just bear with me 1 second. I see Morris and Fawad backstage. You guys want your cameras on? Do you want to leave them on? All right, cool. Brother Fawad, assalamu alaikum, and Brother Morris, assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers, how are you doing?
Good, man. Good. What's going on?
Assalamu alaikum. Is that
so, Danny, sorry, continue what you were saying, Danny.
Yeah, so brute is a term we can use that it designates that it has no explanation. So if there's a brute thing, it has no explanation. If there's a brute fact, its truth value has no explanation. All right. So a contingent fact, as I understand it, now they're different. You're right. If you look at Islamic philosophy, sometimes the word contingent means dependent on. So it's not like you're crazy for using the word contingent to mean dependent on. But another usage of the word contingent just means that it could have had a different truth value. It didn't have to exist. That's a different usage. Okay. And it depends on what kind of contingency argument. If you're looking at like Avicenna or Avicenna, as they all say in Islam, right? I think the word contingent has it has like they have to use the word.
Fine. That's fine. But here's the thing. Okay, fine, fair enough. But here's the thing, though, Danny. So the problem I'm having is, on the one hand, you're saying it doesn't have to exist, but it could still not have an explanation.
Yes, that's called a brute.
By definition, if something doesn't have to exist, by definition, it had to have at some point come into existence.
That's our disagreement.
Okay, so then how? So if something doesn't have to. Okay, so what is it about this bottle? I would say that proves it doesn't have to exist. What is it about it?
Well, I'm just saying that if all we know is that there's a world where there's a bottle that exists. Okay, there's a question: was it caused? Is it explained by something else? And the answer could be no. It's just randomly there, right? It has no explanation, or it could be explained.
But here's the problem. But here's the problem: if something doesn't have to exist. Wouldn't it then make sense? Well, obviously it exists. There's no question it exists. So now the question becomes, okay, how do you arrive at the conclusion it doesn't have to exist? That's the first thing. How do you arrive at that conclusion? And then having established that, having known all the things you needed to know to establish that, how do you then come to the conclusion, or how then do you, or I guess the next question, wouldn't it logically be, well, then it exists. So how does it exist? If it doesn't have to exist, well, then how does it exist? Are you saying you don't know? We can't know?
So two questions, right? The first question is, how do you know something is contingent, right? That's at least by the definition. Okay. That's just, for me, that just is determined by logical truths, right? So if it's logically possible that it doesn't exist, if in other words, if I say X doesn't exist, let's say X exists in the actual world. And if there's some world where it doesn't exist and that's logically possible, then it's contingent. That's how I understand that.
Sure.
So, okay. Now the second thing is that does the term contingent, meaning that let's just look at contingent facts for simplicity's sake. So if some fact in the world, it's some proposition is true. If there's some world where it's false, right? That doesn't logically imply that therefore there's an explanation for why it's true or false, because it could be random, uncaused, unexplained.
Could you repeat the very last one you just said right now? I think I misunderstood it for a minute. Could you repeat it again?
So if there's a fact in the actual world, suppose the water bottle exists, okay? And the way that the first thing I said is that it could be false that the water bottle exists in some other world, right? So that's how we know it's contingent, because there's no contradiction saying it doesn't exist. And then the second thing my other claim is that it doesn't logically follow that because it could have had another truth value, that therefore there has to be an explanation.
But here's the thing, you see, if I was to claim that all other existence was explained by this water bottle, would you have a problem with that?
Yeah, as I understand this world, I wouldn't really understand. Now there could be a world where all concrete objects are explained by the water bottle.
Okay, so here's the thing, you see. So just very simply, if I told you right now this water bottle created you and me, would you have a problem with that?
As in this world, yes. I don't think that makes any sense.
Okay, good. Why doesn't that make sense?
Well, I understand that I have background information about water bottles. I understand them as being created by things like us, human beings, right? And
I'll tell you, even if you didn't know what this was, I mean, okay, let's say you came from a third world where they didn't have water, they didn't have water bottle, or they had water, but I mean, they didn't have water bottles, or whatever. Let's say you never knew what this was. If I pulled out just a rock or some weird crystal or some godforsaken, I don't know, finite limited object, regardless of what it may be, and I told you this thing created you and me and the entire cosmos, what problems would you have with that, just generally speaking?
Well, I have background. Again, it's all the answer to these type of questions depend on my background information about the thing you're talking to. So I have background information about how stars form, galaxies form, how rocks form, and so given that background information, it doesn't make sense for me to think that a rock explains why.
But my friend, even if you gave this water, let's say you gave, let's say someone wasn't very knowledgeable in space and the cosmos and nebula and helium and nuclear fusion, which happens in stars, right? Let's say someone wasn't aware of all these things. Let's say someone never heard of the Big Bang, and you hand them just something they've never seen before. This object, and I told you this object created the universe. You have your senses, you have your tuition, and someone said, you know what? I think this thing could potentially have created the universe. Would you have an intellectual argument against that? Or would you say,
no, because what you've done, the way I understand these types of questions is that they're determined by your background information. And if you take away my background information, then for all I know, this object that I don't know anything about, that I've never seen before, could have explained the expansion of the universe. Right? I mean, but that's, so basically, I'm silly, but the point is that
it sounds like you're quite literally, how do I say this? Like, you're ignorant of something, but then you're willing to hide behind that ignorance. So for example, let's say I don't know where this tree came from. I don't know where that tree came from. But then if I told you, I think, I don't know, I believe that I have a magic wand. I believe this magic wand caused that tree to grow, like Harry Potter style. Someone mentioned Harry Potter, right? Right? Now, you could go and say, well, I don't really know how magic wands work. I don't really know what kind of tree that is. I don't know.
If I interrupt, I think what's going to be more analogous is if you were in the Marvel universe and you didn't know anything about the Marvel universe and someone showed you the Infinity Stones and said, this is why.
I don't really know much about Marvel. I don't really.
Perfect. Okay. That's great. Because if I threw you in the Marvel universe and someone showed you these sparkly stones that they call the Infinity Stones, and they said, this is what explains why there's a universe, why there's life, why there's all these minds, and right. I don't think given that you don't know anything about the Marvel universe, for all you know, what they could be saying is true.
But here's the problem, Vo. You want to say something?
Yeah. Hi, Danny. Go ahead. If I may interject over there, see, the entire conversation, like I've been listening to you guys back and forth. In general, in philosophy, my brother, contingency is always described in, something that has an outside explanation by definition.
Not a modal logic.
It's got, no. Yeah, let me complete, okay? Because it seems like you have no clue what you're talking about. I don't know what philosophers you've been reading that describe it that way, okay?
Have you studied modal logic?
No, I haven't. But we're talking about contingency. Okay, we're talking about contingency. Stop throwing fancy terms at us, thinking
Modal
we're
isn't a
supposed to
fancy
know
term in
everything.
philosophy, right? Modal is a very common term.
We're gonna go one thing at a time. Okay, brother. So chill.
Well, you already made the first claim. Let's analyze that.
In general, brother, it's a dialogue. It cannot be a monologue. If we're talking over each other, we're not gonna get anywhere.
Okay, I'll mute.
Okay?
I'll mute.
Yeah. So contingency, by definition, has to have an outside explanation, and it can be any other way. Okay, there are three parts to it. And it doesn't have to exist at all in possible world semantics, okay? That's the definition of contingency thing. So basically in philosophy, you have three types of possible existences, okay? One is an impossible existence, like a squared circle or a married bachelor, okay? The second type is contingent, which means by definition, it has to have an outside explanation, okay? And it can be any other way. And the third is a necessary existence that by definition is the complete opposite of contingent things, okay? It doesn't require an outside explanation, and it cannot be any other way in possible world semantics, okay? So if you have something different to propose, please back it up, because just by naming these fancy terms, it wouldn't do you any good. You're wasting your time and our time over here as well here, brother. Okay, by definition, as I said, contingent things, it cannot be, it must have to have an outside explanation. Go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, Rumsey and I already went over this. There are multiple usages of the word contingent in philosophy, right? I'm happy to say that a lot of Islamic scholars, Islamic philosophers in the Golden Age use the word contingent to mean sort of dependent. And there are also Christian philosophers around who was Isaac Newton's I forgot his name, but he ran the contingency argument around Isaac Newton's time and a little bit after Leibniz.
I have to. You're talking about.
He was he's like one of the reasons why Isaac Newton got popular over Leibniz. No, I'll look it up later, but they use the word contingent to mean dependent right now in modal logic. Now, modal logic is a branch in logic, which is a domain in philosophy. Okay. When we express in modal logic, contingent, right? And there's an operator for contingent and there's an operator for necessity, right? Contingent with respect to proposition just means could have had a different truth value. It has nothing to say about whether that truth value is explained or not. In fact, that's the whole reason why people that run the contingency argument employ something called the principle of sufficient reason. This is a principle that's used in the contingency argument. And if you look at Leibniz or any other person that run contingency arguments, they presuppose the principle of sufficient reason to say that contingent things and contingent facts are in fact have to be explained, right? So you're just demonstrably wrong that there's not a unified usage of the word contingent. You have to specify the philosopher you're talking about, the time period you're talking about, the realm of philosophy you're talking about to say that this is the usage that you're using or that it's being used. And I'm fine with that.
But here's the problem.
Why don't you just go off of the fundamentals and just use the word necessary and possible and disregard the philosopher and just stick to the question at play along with the topic of theology? Why are you trying to convolute the matter by inserting all these
look, how about this? I think this
talking about Thomas Aquinas, okay?
No, I'm not talking about Aquinas.
Okay, then I don't know, because it's either Al-Ghazali, okay, who came up with the contingency argument. Well, So, and the Kalam cosmological argument, then we have Al-Ghazali, in the 11th century, and after that, it's Thomas Aquinas. If you have somebody else to name, please do let me know, because these are the only three people that I know.
This all stemmed from the question of, because here's the thing, you see, contingent typically, from my experience, from my humble research, typically is used interchangeably with dependent. I understand contingent has some other meanings along with dependent. Contingent is a bit more broad of a word than the word dependent. Dependent is kind of like, I guess you can call a subcategory of being contingent. Many would consider it. But in any case, the fundamental question, Danny, was, Do you believe that this? Okay, so here's just a simple question, maybe with observation. The universe. Do you believe it's finite or infinite?
I really don't know.
You don't know. Okay. How about this? I believe it's finite, and I believe there's a logical way we can demonstrate that. So, okay. So this water bottle, my phone, you and me, and my computer, and the trees outside, the birds you can probably hear chirping, they're really annoying. All these things are finite quantities. We would agree?
Yeah, well, finite in the sense that they haven't always existed. Is that the idea?
Yeah, sure. They're finite.
Okay, yeah. I don't think
right?
all the things I'm looking at right now haven't always existed.
Right, sure. If you want to maybe use mathematics to define it, the number one is a finite limited quantity, correct?
Sure.
Right. So if you continue to add finite limited quantities, will you ever reach infinity?
No, that doesn't make sense.
Agreed. If you continue to add a bunch of finite limited quantities, there will never be a time where you reach infinity. At the very end, eventually because these are all finite limited quantities, eventually you have to reach a point where there's no more finite limited quantities. And if you add all those together, it's just one giant finite quantity. Nonetheless,
I missed that. Can you repeat that?
What I said was that if you keep on adding finite quantities, by definition, because they're finite quantities, you'll eventually reach an end point where there are no more finite
I don't
quantities.
know if I agree with that, but I'm not so sure if I've understood you.
So you believe in an infinite number of finite quantities?
Well, like if you there can be an infinite set. Each member is finite. You can take a set with an infinite, infinite number of members, but each member is finite. But you have an infinite number of things.
But I just asked you a minute ago, if you keep on adding a finite number of quantities together, will you ever reach infinity? You said no, that doesn't logically make sense.
That doesn't make sense. But that you don't get the other conclusion from that.
But I just repeated the exact same conclusion with just slightly different words.
No. What I thought you said is that, first of all, reaching infinity is not a number. So I agree. Okay. So, but the point is
it's
that
logically impossible.
Right, but if you keep on adding, like take your number analogy. If I add 1 and I add 2, I add 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Will you ever reach infinity?
No, but that doesn't mean you're gonna have.
No, you won't. You just that's it. You just said no, you won't.
But look, you said there would be an endpoint. There is no endpoint there.
But you just said you'll never reach infinity. If there's no endpoint, by definition, you'll reach infinity.
No, you won't. Wait, I think there's a confusion here.
I think so.
Let me be very clear about what I'm saying. Okay.
Right.
It doesn't make logical sense to say that we've reached infinity. That's what I think doesn't make sense.
That or we ever will reach infinity, right?
Yeah, that doesn't even make sense.
Right.
Okay. Now, what I thought you said, though, is that if we continue adding, let's say, if we think of the number line, go to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, eventually it will stop at an end. That's not going to be true because the natural numbers extend all the way. It's endless.
My friend, hold on. If we keep on adding a number, will that number line ever reach infinity?
No.
Right. So by definition, there has to be an end. If it doesn't go on for infinity,
no, that's just wrong. That's just wrong. That's just.
I know why he's saying what he's saying, Ramsey. He's saying it because he's working in sets and categories. So it's here. I'll clear it up for you. Do you believe in a multiverse, Danny?
No.
Okay, now he's definitely confused me as well. So when you're talking about numbers and sets, you're talking. Ramsey gave you an example. His example of infinity is saying that you will never reach infinity. Therefore, by definition, it is finite. Now, if you're categorizing the numbers as a set and you're saying the set has infinity in there, then my friend, you take the position of a multiverse.
No. Look, imagine this. Here's a ball here, okay? And if I add another ball to it, I have 2. And I have a third, 4, 5, 6. Right. And I can go on, right?
Until
and there
when?
will not.
Until
here's a
when?
clue. There in principle is not an endpoint. I can always continue adding
infinity then.
Right. Hold on. By definition, every time you add one, will you ever reach infinity? Will there ever be a time? I agree.
Will you ever stop?
I agree. You can keep adding and adding.
Okay.
And adding. But will there ever be, or could there ever be a time where you'll be able to say, I have infinity, or I plan on having infinity? I'm going to keep adding until I have infinity. Is that possible?
Okay, so what you're saying is if I'm at the 100th ball, I freeze it. I have a finite number, right?
By definition, you have to have a finite number.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I'm fine. But then if you freeze it, you can consider that 100th ball as an endpoint, but you can keep on adding.
That's the definition of what a finite existence is.
You
can keep adding to it. You can keep adding to it.
The point is that if you're, I understand that there's something called a potential infinite, right? So if you think of a starting point and then it goes infinitely to the, to a certain direction, okay? You could take any number or any event, moment. Did you want to say something, Fawad?
Yeah. Did you say a starting point? So would you grant then that you agree that infinite regression is not possible?
Oh, I think infinite regression is possible.
Okay, demonstrate that, please.
I'm saying
there's no logical contradiction.
Can I give a different example? Maybe this example will help. So let's say you have like dominoes, right? I love dominoes growing up, right? Let's say there was like a line of dominoes as far as the eye could see. You can't see the end of it. You can't see the end of it. It goes so far you can't see.
Is there an end? Is there an end?
Well, good question. We're gonna get that.
Okay.
Get to that. So let's say there's you can't see you can't see if there's an end. If there's not an end, you can't see. It's too far. And then all of a sudden you're standing, and then the line of dominoes ends by your feet somehow, and then the dominoes start falling. You can see them in the distance. They're starting to fall. They're starting to fall. They're falling. They're falling. They're falling until the very end. The very last one by your foot fell. Okay. Now you can't see the end, or even if there is an end. Okay. Let me ask you a question. Is it possible that that line of dominoes infinitely goes into the path, goes into the distance?
Yes.
No, he doesn't understand. Okay, let me put it to you this way. I'm going to break it down to you very simply. Is
there a contradiction?
No, yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay. I don't see a contradiction.
So I'm going to explain it to you in the simplest terms possible, right? The very fact that you are standing here today and consider the present as the present means that there is a beginning, and therefore it is finite.
I don't see why I don't see why anyone would believe that.
Okay, give me evidence to the contrary, because there had to have been a starting point.
You're making a logical claim. It's not about evidence. You're just making a logical claim that necessarily.
Okay, I'll help out there. So imagine you going back in time. Would you ever be able to come back to this moment if there were infinite regression?
Okay, let me understand. So I went back into time. So let's go back to 1970.
Here's a better one. If you had to wait an infinite amount of time before the stream, will you ever get to the stream?
No, I wouldn't.
Right. Okay. So by definition,
but that's different than the domino case.
It's not different though. For you to explain, a finite amount of time had to pass for you. I'm sorry. A finite amount of time had to pass before you reached the stream. If an infinite amount of time,
it's not true either.
If I told you, Danny, I have a stream coming up, it's an infinite amount of time into the future. Would you go to your calendar and be like, okay, I'm gonna go set my time? Or would you be like, Rumsey, you're insane. There's something wrong with you.
Yeah. So you're saying that there's an infinite amount of time between now and this endpoint, then yeah, you're never going to reach that endpoint. But that's not what's being illustrated in the dominoes. Right. Look, there's different. First of all, when you're talking about infinites, there are three types of infinite sequences. Okay, there's beginningless sequences with endpoints. There's beginning sequences at beginnings but have no endpoints, and then you have a beginningless and endless sequence. All of these are coherent. Now, what also matters, especially when it comes to time, is the direction. Okay, because time has a direction.
Let's start with the backwards direction. Let's go with the backwards direction,
okay,
kind of backwards.
But time is not backwards, right? So
hold on 1 second. Okay. So if I told you today, if I told you today, right now, okay, I'm having another stream because I stream usually on weekends. There are an infinite number of days before my next stream. Will I ever stream again?
No.
I will not. Good. If I told you that, right. So you would understand that. So is infinity possible in that direction?
You're not going to reach that endpoint. You're not, because
because it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist.
Well, it doesn't even make logical sense, right? Because you got a contradiction.
That's why it doesn't exist. It doesn't make.
But I can show the contradiction there. Okay.
Well, good. Now, beautiful.
But
now
you can't show them in the domino case.
Good. Hold on. Now let's go. Now let's try the other way. Those dominoes, by definition, if I told you by definition, so in order for one domino to fall, the one before it has to fall, correct? It's in the past, right? The one previous fell, and the one before that one fell, the one before that one fell. If I have a domino right now, and there are an infinite number of dominoes that have to fall before this one falls, will this domino ever fall?
They could in principle. And let me explain that, because the direction matters, okay? So the point is that with the domino case, there you have a beginningless sequence, right? It's beginningless, and it goes infinite to, let's say,
that's a presupposition, bro.
Hold on. If it never began, that means it'll never continue, which means it'll never end.
That's not true. Look. Okay. Again, think of maybe this example might work, and I'll apply it to the domino case. Imagine this: a scenario where always been climbing a mountain. There is no bottom. Okay, but there can be a top.
That doesn't make any sense. Okay, go on.
What does it make sense? What does it tell me the logical problem in saying
I can't
I've always
begin
been
to
climbing?
hold on. By definition, to climb a mountain means to go higher and higher in elevation. If there's no bottom, that means your elevation could never increase. It's like adding to infinity.
Right.
It's like
Ramsey, that's basically like saying that the revolution of Earth and the revolution of Moon is the same.
Y'all need to let me finish. I'm fine with saying there's no elevation. I'm fine with saying there's no elevation, right? But all I'm saying is that there's no logical problem saying that someone's always been climbing.
There is a logical problem with that.
What's the contradiction? Give me the contradiction there.
By definition, to climb means to gain elevation.
No.
What does...
Okay, man, what's your definition of climbing so we can give you the contradiction in the words that you'll understand? What's your definition of climbing in this scenario?
Okay, that I'm going in a certain direction.
Okay, great. And, so how are you determining
I'm
direction?
using my hands and this, right?
How are you determining direction?
In order to climb, your location has to change, correct?
Your location change. Yeah, your location can change.
No, not can, has to.
It has to change. If
but you measure that from the top, not from the bottom.
No, I mention it from whatever dimension you're picturing in your head. If you're picturing this way, that's changed. Up, left, right, down, whatever you want.
One second. You can climb sideways. You can climb down. You can climb up. Yeah. But by definition, your position with respect to the mountain does change, or with respect to the wall.
It changes, but you can't measure it from the bottom. You can only measure from the top, right?
No, you're measuring it to the relevant point of where you were to where you came, where you concluded.
Let me get this out. The mountain case is like this. Imagine 0. There's an infinite set of numbers to the left of 0. They're all negative, right? And the point is that if you're if you're going -5, -4, -3, -2, -1, you can measure the number of the numbers from 0 to a negative number, but you cannot measure, let's say -5. You can't measure -5 from the beginningless sequence to the left, right? Because there's no endpoint there, right? But if you're designating 0 as the endpoint, okay, you can measure from 0 to -5. That's 5 units to the left, right? Sure. So in the same way with the climbing case, wait, -5, that's 5 units from 0, right? You can measure that. But you can't measure from there's no starting point in the case.
Wait a minute. Now, hold on a second. Does -5 exist in reality? Or is that conceptual?
Hold on. He wouldn't even have the ability to place it at -5 because there's no starting point.
Hold on a second. -5, look, hold on. Infinity exists in mathematics. That's not a problem. But mathematics is conceptual. It's theoretical. It's not actual reality. Can I have a -5 number of water bottles?
No.
Obviously not. It's conceptual. It's not reality. You can't measure that in reality. If I told you right now, what do you call it? I guess you can't have a -5, kind of -5 altitude, but I mean, that's because it's based on sea level. But you can't say I'm a -5 number of feet from the ground. You can't do that, right?
Oh, you can. Yes, you can.
If you're climbing,
you can dig.
Oh my God. Okay. Is there an infinite number of? Can I be a zero? Can I be a negative distance from Earth?
From the surface of the Earth? Yes.
From Earth, from planet Earth. Can I be?
I don't even know what that means. I know what it means to say the surface.
You know, it doesn't make sense because you don't know what it means because it doesn't make sense.
Look, it makes sense to say that you can measure negative depth from the surface.
My friend. Okay, wait, hold on a second. But by definition, that requires a finite fixed point, correct?
0 in this case, yes.
Okay, great. So now for you to climb in any direction, whether it's underground, above ground, there has to be a 0 point. You can't say it goes on infinite in that direction.
You could. I don't think, not in this world, because we know that the Earth doesn't go all the way down. There's
one second. You love that example, climbing underground. Can I climb infinite underground an infinite distance from the surface and say the surface is an infinite direction? The surface is an infinite number of meters.
No, you can't do that. But what you can do, there can be a possible world. That's not what I'm illustrating. You're not understanding my point. Oh, that's not what I'm illustrating. Imagine a world where you have a surface, right, and it goes infinitely deep. Okay,
that's
so if I go, what's the contradiction there?
My friend, if something goes on infinity, if something is finite and limited, it requires a previous explanation. You can't have an infinite number of plus. Bro, this is like saying I have an infinite number of plus ones. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
How can you keep adding up ones and get to infinity?
Well, you can't get to. That's not what you said. You said something different than that.
Can I have an infinite number of dominoes?
Yes.
If an infinite number of dominoes has to fall,
and I would rather frame it in terms of an infinite series.
This is my last question. You guys can try. In order for a domino to fall, the previous one has to fall before it, correct?
Yes.
And that's in the past, correct?
Yes.
Okay. If an infinite number of dominoes has to fall before this domino, will this domino ever fall?
No, but that's not what I'm trying to illustrate.
Thank you.
You understand? No. Your confusion, Rimsey, is that there's direction here. You're ignoring there's direction.
Exactly. That's in the past.
That's
why I said it's in the past.
Let's start with agreement. Let's just start with agreement. Here's where we agree. We agree that if you have an endpoint and there's an infinite amount of events, numbers, dominoes, you cannot reach that endpoint because of you have to get through an infinite. That's trivially true.
Regardless of which direction, and I just proved
no,
that.
No, the direction matters. Hold on. The direction matters.
It doesn't, though, because I just proved to you with a past event. I didn't say in the future. I said in the past. This domino, if it had an infinite number of past dominoes that had to fall for it to fall, it would never
Yeah, his definition of direction,
that's not what you said. No, look,
what's your definition of direction?
There are two interpretations of what you're saying, right?
Exactly.
The first one is you have an endpoint. If there's an infinite amount of time that you need to get through a traverse, can you get to the endpoint? No. But that's not the second interpretation. The second interpretation is that you have an endpoint, you have a series, an infinite series to the left of the endpoint. Now, could you reach that endpoint? The answer is yes. Right? Because you could always be traveling to the endpoint.
You just need to help me understand this for a second.
Okay.
The example I just gave, the domino, if an infinite number of dominoes had to fall for it to fall, it will never fall. Can we agree on that?
You can't traverse. Look, you can go through an infinite series.
Let me try with him real quick. Let me just try with him. I want to bring a component of reality.
If an infinite number of dominoes have to fall for this domino to fall, this domino will never fall. That's an infinite in the past. It doesn't work.
But if it's beginningless and you stipulate that you're traveling in the direction towards the endpoint,
infinity means.
My man, he's not giving you the perspective of physics where you're literally moving at the same speed as the object. That's how you're looking at it.
I don't know what that has to do with the conversation.
It's exactly it's the example that you just used, and that's why you keep bringing up this sense of direction, because some object has to be standing still in order for you to gain perspective. But I'm going to put it to you in the most real way possible. And just answer these questions as straightforward as you possibly can. Are you infinite or finite?
I consider myself be infinite. I'm finite, sorry.
Okay. Fantastic.
Sorry.
Do you have limited time of existence on this world?
Yes.
Okay. Why are you arguing about infinity then?
I'm just saying it's logically possible to have an infinite series and an end.
Okay, what's that going to get you? What's the end game, bro?
Okay, here's the
someone made the claim that it was impossible.
Here's the problem. Here's the thing though. That is problem. It is problematic that he holds that view, Morris, because by definition, if you believe an infinite amount of events can lead to a finite event, by definition, he can essentially say that the universe eternally always existed. This finite bottle always eternally existed. I can argue that.
Rumsey doesn't want to say that's possible. He wants to say that you had to have a beginning.
My friend. If I told you right now that my stream will happen in an infinite number of days, will you ever see me on stream?
No, but that's not analogous to the domino case.
Hold on. It's directly analogous. It's directly analogous. If I have a domino here and an infinite, meaning there is no limit, it'll keep going on forever.
Let me try to illustrate the difference. Can I try to illustrate the difference? Imagine, okay, have you heard of the sniper example?
Yes,
where like, okay. That's a good way to illustrate our disagreement. Okay. So here's the idea.
Right.
What you're saying is impossible, and where we're going to agree it's impossible is this. You take someone has a shot on a target, and he needs permission from the person before him. And that person needs permission from before him. Right. So the direction is you have to go backward, right? To get permission, and there's no beginning. So that the sniper will never take the shot. It's impossible. But time is not
what are we arguing about? Then you agree.
Let me get this out. Let me get it out. So let me get it out. Notice the direction. The direction is going backward, right? You have to you're going back into the series. But time doesn't work that way.
Okay, right? How does time work?
So imagine. So that scenario is different than this scenario. Can you just let me know when you're done so I can get? I mean, I can't even get to because I'm agreeing with you.
Go on.
I can't. I'm agreeing with you to a certain extent, but there's an extent which I don't. We agree on the sniper case that you will never be able to take that shot if you have to go backward and ask permission. There's an infinite series of commanders. Okay. Now this is a totally different case. Imagine a case where there's permission always been granted. That is going in a forward direction, not in a backward direction. Okay. So permission is being granted always. Then you can have an endpoint. right? Because you could freeze the
question.
snapshot.
So let's take that step by step. So I'm the sniper, or not me, because I'm gonna get racial profiled right now. Someone's gonna clip this out. Some white person who's not brown with no beard is a sniper, right? And decides to take a shot at obviously a criminal target, not an innocent target, right? Because I'm telling you, they're listening in. If a police sniper, for example, is taking a shot, he received permission. Is it possible that he received permission from somebody, from an infinite number of people in the past?
Yes.
I'm done at this point. Thank you, Danny. Look, I appreciate Danny. Keep going. Go ahead. Say what you want.
Okay. I'll just say one thing. Can you explain to me? Can you respond back to what I asked earlier?
I just let him. I want to be fair. Danny, you want to respond?
No, sure. It might help if I draw it. Okay, I think I
draw an infinite number of things.
You can simulate. Look. I'm gonna draw it. Fawad, can you say what you were saying while I pull up paint?
I was just gonna ask the same question that I asked earlier. Can you tell me how you'll end up in this time if you keep going in the infinite past?
That's what we're talking about. Okay, so can I share my screen? I shared my screen. It's just paint.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna regret this. I gotta see this. You guys, I can't wait to see an infinite number of people giving someone command. I can't wait.
Okay, so here's the sniper. Okay, now the sniper has to ask someone from, let's just say from a commander, and that person has to go from the commander, and then you go back.
Yeah.
And that line represents, infinity, right? Yeah. So there's the sniper, and I would agree with you. Let me get a different color because I like to. He cannot take the shot. Okay. Right. Now what?
Now draw that direction to the right, on the other side.
Sorry, what was that?
Draw the same thing, but with the arrows pointed a different direction.
Now the way I was illustrating is this. Let's say that someone has always been granting permission. So the arrows go this way.
Oh, wait a minute. In order for someone to grant permission, somebody has to actually grant that permission. It's not something.
And it goes on infinitely in the. But you understand there's a directional change.
No. But here's the problem though. That permission, is it necessary or unnecessary?
Oh, I don't know what you mean now.
Okay.
Wait, before you ask your question, can I just? There's a difference between requesting permission and granting permission. That represents the two directions.
You have to request it to grant it. You're not just gonna.
No. If you're requesting, you're not being granted.
Even if you're granting, no problem. For someone to grant it, the act of granting.
There's directions.
But here's the thing, though. For
someone to please let me talk to him real quick. You're hung up on this directional thing when it's a non sequitur. And what I mean by that is you are lit. What direction are you going, bro? What direction is time going relevant to us?
Time is disanalogous from the case where you're requesting permission and analogous to the case where
stop talking about the case of requesting permission and not requesting permission.
Are you interested in my answer?
No, I'm not, because I'm not interested in whiff-waff. What you're doing is you're not respecting the question. Okay, I'm going to ask it again. Relevant to our lives, what direction is time going? Are we going forward or backward?
Forward.
Great. So if we're aging forward, that means we need to take a look at the past, and we look at the past from a timeline looking in the past, correct?
Okay.
So why do I care? Or I have no idea of the knowledge of what's going to happen forward. All I can work with is information in the past.
I'm not disputing any of this. This is not the dispute. The dispute is this: is time more like requesting permission all the way back, or is it more like always have granting permission to the way forward? And I'm saying that time is like.
Okay, in that example, is granting permission something that by definition, by necessity, has to be happening?
I don't think so, but that seems tangential.
Okay, then good. Then if you don't, then that's great. If it's not, so for example, do you have to be receiving permission, or could you be receiving a deny, like you're being denied to take the shot?
Well, within this illustration, or are we just talking about logically?
So in the example of a sniper taking a shot, again, a white guy taking a shot at a innocent target, right? A person is taking a shot. He's either receiving an agreement from his commander, or he's receiving a decline. Are both of those options? Are both of those possible options, or is only one of them by necessity?
Just if I'm just thinking about snipers and commanders, that both are possible.
Okay, great. Both are possible. So therefore, neither of them are necessary. So for you to say, well, by necessity, he has to be receiving the permission.
Oh, I don't think I meant to make a necessary claim.
But here's the thing, though. But maybe you didn't, but you did by default, because you said earlier, you know what? You're not requesting permission, but he's receiving it as if him receiving it is something that has to necessarily be true.
No, what I'm
but
saying is this: is that
there had to be a point where somebody began to give permission, and then at that point it came down the line. But if someone granted permission and then it went down an infinite number of people, it would never reach you.
But that's not the way it's being. So in the first case, what's being stipulated is a sniper, and he requested permission, and it goes infinitely to the right. But what the second scenario, what's being stipulated is that there's a series where commanders have always been granting permission, and then there's an endpoint.
But by definition, for someone to grant permission, do they have to be granting permission, or can they by definition not grant it?
It doesn't matter either way.
It does, though, because when you describe it,
now I'm confused. I don't know the angle here.
I'm sorry?
Now I'm confused. I'm not so sure what the angle is now with the necessity stuff.
Because in your example here,
and
with the example on the right, with the arrows coming with the arrow coming from the right, You're by definition those arrows going to the left and then to the left and then to the left and to the left. Those are exactly. Those by definition, you said, well, you're not requesting permission. You're just being granted it. You're just being granted.
It's being granted. Yeah, it's all.
Here's the problem: does he have to be granting it, or can it by definition be the opposite direction and go, nope, we don't grant permission?
Oh, well, I could sure it could be where he's always been denied. There's always been a denial.
Okay. Regardless, it doesn't matter. Either way, neither of which are a necessary option. One by definition is not. Sorry, neither of which is necessary. In other words, they don't have to be happening. In fact, one of them could just stop speaking. One of those people in the line could just stop speaking. Agreed?
Sure.
If one of those people in the line just stopped speaking, will that answer ever reach you? Obviously not. If an infinite number of people were in front of you, that answer would never reach you. But you're by definition assuming that answer, like that answer of yes, you can take the shot, yes, you could take the shot, extends infinitely in the past. But by definition, to be given permission, there had to be a start point. Some first person had to have.
That's what we're disagreeing about. That's what we're disagreeing about.
But what the difference between what we're disagreeing about, I'm saying there has to be, and there's an obvious explanation. There's an obvious way we can demonstrate that. I can get you a large number of people that at some point there has to be a beginning where someone started saying.
But that's what's in question. Look, I'm just saying to make. I agree with you.
Your example is just your.
What is mine? Can you just dictate the example? What's the example?
Basically, you're just saying it's possible, just to say it's possible. But there's no.
No. So look, that's not. Look, this is the critical disagreement. The stipulation is this. Imagine I've always been climbing, or someone's always been granting permission. That's where you say it doesn't make sense, right? That's where you want to say red light, right? Correct? You think there's a logical problem in stipulating
to infinitely be increasing something is illogical. To add to infinity is illogical. Yes.
So there has to be a contradiction. Sorry, there's a fly. There has to be a contradiction in the statement. I've always been climbing, or I've always been granting
basically,
permission.
if I was to use mathematics, you're basically saying to add to infinity is impossible, but you can subtract and get to infinity.
How am I saying that? Look, take this proposition.
That something
you're going to have to deduce a contradiction from this proposition. I don't see a way around it.
Because
I've always been climbing.
Essentially, what you're saying, if you can go infinite into the past, into the backwards direction, into the negative direction, okay, that basically saying you can keep subtracting and you'll eventually reach a negative infinity. But somehow that's fine. But then when I say, okay, same logic, but in the other direction, if you keep adding, will you ever reach infinity? You say no. Basically, what you're saying is infinity doesn't exist, but negative infinity doesn't exist. Excuse me. Sorry. Opposite. The infinity does not exist, but negative infinity, it can exist. It's fine. Because
all right. Well, I like this kind of conversation. A lot of people get tired out really fast when we're talking about infinites and cosmological arguments.
I know maybe I'm not showing it. I got tired like 20 minutes ago. I'll be honest.
Okay. Well, I never get tired of this stuff. But so I want to respect your stream. But this is my last thing: is that I think that when I say always, okay. One last example. Do you think it's logically coherent to say that there's a world where there's been a red ball that's always been bouncing? Is that logically coherent?
If it's a finite, if it's a finite quantity, then no.
Like it's just that this has been happening always.
You can measure. It takes up a finite amount of space and it takes up a finite amount of matter. Yes, it's impossible.
Okay, so it's impossible for a ball to always be bouncing at all moments in time.
Infinitely past and infinitely future. Yes.
Okay. Well, I want to respect the fact that you've been burned down in the conversation. So unless you want to change the topic or move on, then
I still did not get an answer to what I asked. How do you get to this particular point of time if you're going in the infinity
But
past?
that's what we've been discussing. Where have you been?
No.
I think the math example.
How do you get to this moment? Demonstrate that.
This. I think the mathematics I gave demonstrates it perfectly. So when I said, can you ever add up to infinite, or can an infinite number of events lead to an event? You said no, right? You said that.
No, I said yes.
The problem is if you keep going. Look, I'll give you another example.
Oh my God!
The revolutions of Earth around the sun and the revolutions of Moon around the Earth. Is there a difference between them or not?
The difference between revolutions of the Earth around the sun versus the revolutions of what? Sorry.
The revolution of Earth around the sun and the revolution of Moon around the Earth.
Okay, what
is there a difference between them or not?
Certainly, there's one's a moon, one's a planet. Yeah.
According to what you're saying, there's no difference because infinity passed.
What? I don't understand. Sorry.
Now look, Danny.
Think over that.
Like this, Danny. Basically, you said an infinite into the forward direction is impossible, correct?
Well, in the sniper case, you're never going to take the shot.
Sure. So it's okay. Yeah. So you agree. So an infinite number of events in the forward direction is impossible. In other words, if we're going to break it down to math, you can never add up to infinity.
Okay.
That's basically what you're saying in mathematics.
You can never add up. You can't reach infinity infinity is
right.
Not an
you can never keep
adding
in the forward direction and reach infinity. But yet, according to you, an infinite number of events in the past can lead to a finite thing in the present.
Yeah, because here's a disagreement.
In other words, okay, but this is mathematically what it breaks down to. You can keep subtracting infinitely, basically. That's what you're saying. You can keep subtracting.
No, I'm just saying, look, all I'm saying is this. Irrespective of time, if we're just looking at math, in math, there are such things as beginningless series with an end point.
But those are theoretical. Those are not real.
Sure, okay. But we're talking, aren't you talking about math now?
But here's the problem. One of those theoretical, which is in reality impossible, you agree with, but the other you disagree with. I don't see why. Adding forward into the future infinitely, that can't be true. But subtracting infinitely into the past, that's possible. So I agree they're both theoretically. I agree they're both theoretical.
That's exactly why I gave him the example of the revolutions. Okay, he needs to watch this stream again and ponder over what I asked. Okay,
I'll let you have the last. I'll go ahead first. I'm sorry. Finish. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My foot. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Danny. Another thing I would implore you to do is please do study the contingency argument a little bit more. Because the way you described it, that's not how it is understood in philosophy.
Oh, really? Name one contemporary philosopher. Well, name one contemporary philosopher that you've studied that works on the contingency argument. Do you know any?
Oh no. I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
Because I actually read Alexander Proust and William Lane Craig on these contingency argument. You haven't.
I wouldn't consider William Lane Craig to be authoritative on these things, but regardless,
he just takes Alexander Proust's versions of. Alexander Proust is the guy to go to with respect to the contingency argument, right?
And the way you describe it, that's how he describes it.
Yes.
So how does he describe contingency again?
Contingency for him, specifically with respect to contingent facts, are facts or propositions that are true but that could have been false. That's all contingent means.
We agree with that. I don't disagree with
that. That's not what Fawad. No, Fawad is saying is by definition dependency. That's
that too. That too. By definition.
Of course.
No, but you and him disagree.
I will dig it up for you. I will dig it up for you because I don't have the books ready in front of me, but I'll dig it up for you. This is, brother, in philosophy, this is how it is understood.
Who are you citing? I'm citing Alexander Proust. Who are you citing?
No one? Danny, you realize it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Look, just because I'm not able to cite it now does not mean that it doesn't exist.
One second, Danny. It's a false dichotomy. Danny. You keep saying it has to be one or it has to be the other.
No, I'm saying it could be either. But he's saying it has to be one. He's the one doing it.
No. It's
not
either.
Because
by definition,
philosophy is metaphysics. You idiot!
You don't know what you're talking about.
You don't know what you're talking about because it is metaphysics. It is not a fact. You can't make contingency necessary existence as a fact. That's why they call it metaphysics.
I'm sorry to say, but I'm an adjunct professor. I teach philosophy. I have a terminal degree in philosophy, and I've read way more than you on this issue. And I'm telling you,
buddy, are you listening to the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Yeah, are you?
What did I say? What did I say? Can you repeat that to me?
You're saying there's a univocal usage of the word contingent to mean dependency. That when you study the contingency,
That's not
argument,
what I said. What did I say just previously? See, this is why. This is the problem with you guys. You don't guys listen. You guys speak more than you listen. You got 2 ears for a reason. You don't have to be a philosopher to know this. What did I say? It is metaphysics. Stop calling it a fact. It is not a fact. It is metaphysics we're talking about.
Exactly. Just 1 second. Okay, guys. I don't think Fawad is saying that's the only way to define contingent, but by definition, something.
No, he's saying in philosophy. In philosophy, how many usages of the word contingent are there?
Talking about philosophy, yes. But guys,
ask him.
Danny, hold on. Let me just be clear here. What we're saying, what Fawad is saying, what I'm saying, and I hold to this as well. Something that is contingent, by definition, has to be dependent. Is that the only thing that defines contingency? No, it's not.
In philosophy, no. But that's not what he was saying earlier.
Okay, but you disagreed with what I just said right now. Okay, so
so you agree that the contingency argument, Fawad, there's a sense of contingent where it does not mean dependent.
Hold on a second.
Brother,
no, that's not what we're saying.
I want to answer that question.
Okay, guys, no, Fawad, not Fawad. Sorry, Danny, I'm getting confused here. What we're saying here, Danny, is that by definition, something that is contingent has to be dependent. Now, is that the only thing contingent means? Obviously not. There's more to it than that. I mean, you can go further and say it doesn't have to exist. There could be an alternate universe where it doesn't exist. Yes, those things all fall under the umbrella of contingency, including dependency. You can't have something contingent and not dependent.
That's just not true. That's not true. That's not what I've been saying.
Well,
I've been saying this.
I highly disagree, but you know what? We're gonna have to leave it off.
We lost the anchor, bro. We lost
I'm just letting you know.
Guys, stop, please.
In the context of contingency arguments, right? The one sense of contingent means dependent. The other sense means just different truth value or something like that.
Okay, fine. No problem. Danny, we're going to disagree for now. Is that cool? All right.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Thank you, Danny. Have a good one.